You need to take it down. This is your final warning." First of all, that's what she said. Karen Delaney, standing at the edge of my lawn like she owned it, clipboard in hand, HOA badge pinned to her blazer like she was about to issue a military decree instead of a neighborhood fine. She didn't even look up at the flag, just straight at me, like I was the problem, not the banner waving in the breeze. Let me back up a second. My name's Daniel Whitmore. I've lived in this house for almost 20 years, but it's been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather built it in 1948 with his bare hands after returning from Europe. And the flag? That flag has been hanging off the front porch ever since. Not as decoration, as a promise, as a reminder. Before we get any deeper, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? And while you're here, subscribe if you believe people shouldn't be bullied off their own property for honoring a legacy. Back to that flag. I still remember being 6 years old, sitting on the porch swing next to Grandpa as he told stories about crossing into France, his unit surviving 3 nights in the Ardennes. He never made himself out to be a hero. He always pointed to that flag and said, "That's the only hero I ever served under." It's weathered now, the stripes slightly faded, the stitching loose at the corners. But I never had the heart to replace it. That flag has seen births, funerals, graduations, and the day we lost my wife Hannah 5 years ago. She used to sit under that flag every evening with a book and a glass of lemonade. My daughter Emily still leaves a daisy by the porch rail every year on Hannah's birthday. It's more than fabric, it's our anchor, a piece of our story. And that story started long before Karen Delaney decided it didn't fit the aesthetic of the neighborhood. This whole mess started a week ago with a knock and a pink slip, a violation notice. According to the HOA's updated code, flag displays over 6 feet in height needed a pre-approved architectural variance. Funny thing, that rule wasn't in the handbook last year. I know because I read it, twice, after we had a spat about mailbox paint color. At first I thought it was just Karen being Karen. A new title goes to her head every spring when she gets reelected. The woman polices grass height with a ruler and photographs people's trash cans if they're out 5 minutes past pickup. But this wasn't just petty, it was personal. 3 days after the warning, I got another letter, this time with a fine, $150.00, for non-compliant decorative structures. I called it what it was, nonsense. So I showed up to the HOA meeting, documents in hand, ready to explain the history of the flag, the legacy, the years it had stood there without complaint. I had barely got 5 words out before Karen cut me off. "We're not here to discuss sentimental anecdotes, Mr. Whitmore. The bylaw is the bylaw." And just like that, they moved on to discussing the shade of mulch allowed in common flower beds. My hands shook as I sat down. Not from fear, but from the sudden realization. They weren't going to stop, not until they got their way, not until I took it down. Emily was livid when I told her. She said Mom would have told that lady to plant her clipboard where the sun doesn't shine. She's not wrong. Hannah had a quiet fire to her, the kind that never burned hot but always burned steady. She wouldn't have let them take the flag down either. And I wasn't going to be the first Whitmore to fold. So I made a choice that night. Not just to fight the fine, but to protect what that flag stands for. I didn't know yet how deep this thing was going to go, but I knew this wasn't just about cloth on a pole. It was about history, dignity, and drawing the line in the dirt, just like Grandpa did in 1944. That night I sat on the porch with the flag flapping above me like it always had, like it didn't know it had just been sentenced. I could almost hear Grandpa's voice in the wind, the same gravelly tone he used when he warned me. "Don't let people bully you with a smile on their face, Danny. That's how you lose a home without a war." The next morning, I decided to stop being polite. I grabbed the HOA handbook, the one they drop in our mailbox every January like it's a gift. I flipped through it slowly at the kitchen table, a steaming cup of coffee beside me, and started highlighting everything. I wasn't looking for revenge, not yet. I was looking for a pattern, and sure enough, the pattern found me. Karen had updated the handbook 3 months ago, tucked a new section under Visual Compliance Standards, page 14 buried in a paragraph about landscaping. That's where she slipped in the clause about decorative installations over 6 feet in elevation. I checked the revision history. It wasn't voted on in open session, just added like a ghost clause. Slipped past us while we were worried about leaf pickup schedules. That's when I knew she was baiting me. Later that afternoon, I stepped outside to trim some of the hedges and noticed Karen pacing the sidewalk again, clipboard under one arm. A different neighbor this time. Poor Jim Blevins was getting lectured about the color of his patio chairs. Too bright, she said, clashes with community tones. Jim nodded and muttered something about just wanting to sit in peace. This wasn't about order, it was about control. 2 days later, I got a second violation notice. This one wasn't even about the flag. It cited unapproved mailbox modifications. I hadn't touched the mailbox in 10 years. Apparently, the brass numbers were not consistent with the modern aesthetic they were pushing. Emily called it a vendetta. I called it what it was, harassment. Still, I didn't argue, not yet. I photographed everything, dated every envelope, logged every interaction. I even printed Karen's HOA newsletter, the one with her grinning on the front page beneath the phrase, "Protecting Our Neighborhood Vision." The absurdity was starting to ripple through the block. Lucinda Marsh, who lived 3 doors down and had been part of the neighborhood since before I was born, stopped by with a basket of peach muffins and a whispered warning. "She's turning on you," Lucinda said, voice low and eyes scanning the street. "Same thing happened to the Jorgensens when they tried planting sunflowers last spring." I chuckled. "Sunflowers? Really?" Claimed the yellow was aggressive. I should have laughed harder, but it wasn't funny anymore. Not when the next letter came with a formal threat. Failure to comply would result in lien action over a flag. That night, Emily stood on the porch, staring up at it in silence. Then she asked, "Is this how it starts, Dad? Is this how we lose the house?" I had no answer, just a tight jaw and the creeping sense that this wasn't going away with another stern email or polite conversation. So I wrote a letter, not to Karen but to the entire HOA board. I listed every violation, every change to the handbook, every fine with timestamps and photos. I attached Grandpa's dedication plaque, the one we hung in the hallway in his honor, and ended the letter with a single line. My grandfather didn't survive Omaha Beach just to have his flag bullied off the front porch by a woman with a clipboard. I printed 12 copies and slid them into the board members' mailboxes myself. The next morning, Karen rang my doorbell at 6:58 a.m. Not 7, not 8, 6:58. She handed me a new letter. This one was different. It was a formal demand. Not just a fine, an ultimatum. Immediate removal or HOA disciplinary review. She smiled as she handed it to me, one of those thin-lipped smiles that looked more like a threat dressed up in lipstick. And that's when I realized she wasn't going to back off. So neither was I. I didn't even open the envelope. Karen was halfway down the walkway by the time I let the door close. She didn't wait for questions, just turned on her heel and strolled away like she delivered a birthday card instead of a legal threat. But the paper trembled in my hand, not from fear, more like something inside me finally locking into place. I had made a decision. I wasn't just pushing back anymore. I was preparing for war. That night, I showed up to the monthly HOA board meeting early, not to cause a scene, but to watch, to listen, to learn. The clubhouse meeting room smelled like stale coffee and new carpet. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. 10 chairs in a semicircle. Karen sat at the head of the table like she was about to broker peace in Geneva. I took the seat directly across from her. Beside her was Elliot Granger, the HOA treasurer. Mid-50s, round shoulders, beige sweater. The kind of guy who always looked like he was halfway through saying something but never finished. I'd seen him around the neighborhood 100 times but never really talked to him. Karen shuffled her stack of papers theatrically and cleared her throat. "Let's begin." The first 30 minutes were spent debating whether lawn flamingos counted as unapproved ornamentation. No, really, an actual conversation about lawn flamingos. Meanwhile, I sat quiet, still, eyes locked on Karen, until she finally said the words I came for. "Next order of business, ongoing non-compliance at Lot 34, Mr. Whitmore's residence." I straightened up. Karen didn't look at me. "Flagpole height exceeds ordinance. Violation, letters ignored. No variance requests submitted. We are recommending a disciplinary hearing unless immediate compliance is demonstrated." I didn't speak, not yet. I looked instead at Elliot. He was thumbing through a folder, lips slightly parted, brow furrowed. He paused. His finger hovered over one page, then flicked past it. I noticed his hand twitch, just slightly, like he was about to raise it, then dropped it back to his lap. Any objections? Karen asked. Silence. I raised mine. Yeah, I object to everything you just said, and more importantly, to what you didn't say. Karen's lips curled just slightly. I pulled out my copy of the HOA handbook, the older version, pre-Karen edits. This was the version you handed out 2 years ago. No flagpole clause, no elevation limit. My flag's been up longer than your bylaws. I've lived here longer than your molt standards, and I've got documentation. Karen didn't even blink. You're not recognized for commentary, Mr. Whitmore. This isn't a hearing. Then call it one. She tapped her gavel like this was the Supreme Court. Motion denied. And just like that, they moved on. A motion about repainting the pool deck. He glanced at Elliot again. His eyes flicked to mine, just for a second, then dropped. His jaw tightened. He wasn't just uncomfortable, he was afraid. After the meeting, as the others filed out, Elliot lingered. I stayed seated, let the tension hang. You knew that clause wasn't original, I said softly. Didn't you? He looked down at his hands. They were clenched tightly in his lap. I manage the budget. I don't touch the amendments, he said, voice low. That's all Karen. But you've seen what's happening. I don't want trouble, Mr. Whitmore. Trouble already came, Elliot. I'm just asking you not to help cover it up. He didn't answer, just nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and walked out without another word. But something about the way his hands trembled as he gathered his coat stuck with me. The kind of guilt that doesn't come from being wrong. It comes from staying silent too long. Later that night, Emily asked if I'd made any progress. I told her, maybe not. But something had shifted. I could feel it. It wasn't just about a flag anymore. It was about a board that rewrote rules behind closed doors and people too scared to speak. But the thing about silence? It can only hold so long before it cracks. Have you ever watched someone stay silent when they knew something wasn't right? Drop a comment if you've seen it happen or lived it. And if you're standing up to injustice in your own way, hit subscribe. We've got your back. The silence from Elliot lingered in my head long after the boardroom lights clicked off and the chairs scraped back into neat little rows. He didn't say much, but he didn't need to. I'd seen the truth in the way he wouldn't meet my eyes, in the way his hands trembled. The guilt was growing roots, and roots eventually pushed through concrete. By the weekend, Karen had doubled down. A notice was taped to my front door in bold red letters. Final warning. Enforcement imminent. It looked like something out of a foreclosure horror movie. Emily ripped it down before I could touch it. Is this even legal? She asked, holding the paper like it was something diseased. Depends who you ask, I muttered, folding it up and slipping it into my ever-growing folder of HOA evidence. That was the moment Emily stormed off into her room and came back with something unexpected. A manila folder. You should use this, she said, for your response. Inside was a printed copy of the essay she'd written last fall for school, The Flag on the Porch. A 5-page story about her great-grandfather, the man she never met but always felt close to. About the stories I'd passed down, the flag he raised in 1948, the one that stayed up through wars, recessions, birthdays, and losses. Her mother's death, our healing. She'd submitted it for a state writing competition, won second place. I read it again, slowly this time, and I felt something tighten behind my ribs. It wasn't anger, it wasn't pride, it was resolve. I'm sending this to the neighborhood group, I said. People need to see it. She smiled. Do it. So I posted the essay, just the first paragraph and a photo of the flag on the local HOA Facebook page. No hashtags, no commentary, just her words. And the neighborhood noticed. Within an hour, Lucinda Marsh commented, "That flag's been flying longer than half of us have lived here. Some rules deserve to be broken." 10 likes followed, then 20, then 3 neighbors, quiet ones, messaged me privately to say they didn't agree with Karen either, but didn't want to stir trouble. "I've got kids," one of them said. "Karen watches everyone. It's easier to stay quiet." There it was again, the same fear in a different coat. Still, the tide was shifting, if only a little. 2 days later, a black and white squad car rolled up as I was mowing the front lawn. I killed the motor and met Officer Riley halfway up the walk. A young guy, late 30s, high and tight cut, cautious eyes. "Afternoon, sir," he said. "Got a complaint about a disorderly display. Mind if I take a look?" "Sure," I said, waving him toward the porch. "She finally called the cops, huh?" He glanced at the flag. "This it?" "That's the one. Been there since 1948. He exhaled slowly. "You know, my grandfather had one just like it. I still have it folded in a case above my fireplace." Then he lowered his voice. "Off the record, this is ridiculous." "I know. On the record, I have to write a report. Doesn't mean it's going anywhere." He walked the perimeter, took a few photos with his phone, and handed me a card. "If they escalate again, call me directly. I've seen her type. Authority without empathy." It was the first time I'd heard someone else name it out loud. That night, I installed a security camera on the front porch, not because I was scared of break-ins, but because I didn't trust HOA hands near that flag. Emily stood beside me while I tightened the screws. "What happens next?" she asked. "Whatever needs to," I said, "but we're not moving, and we're not backing down." She looked at the flag fluttering in the porch light, then whispered, "Mom would be proud." Yeah, she would. This wasn't about fines anymore. It was about memory, about keeping something alive that didn't come from a policy manual. It came from blood, from stories, from staying when everyone else folded. The next morning, I woke up with an idea I couldn't shake. The essay, the support online, even Officer Riley's quiet nod. They were sparks, but sparks don't start fires unless you give them fuel. And I remembered something my grandfather once said when I was a kid helping him clean out the garage. If you ever need the truth, it's not always in plain sight. Sometimes it's in the places we stopped looking. I hadn't been in the basement storage room since Hannah passed. It wasn't a conscious choice, it just hurt to open that door. But if there was any place left that might hold answers, proof of the flag's history, it was there. So I grabbed a flashlight, pried the old door open, and stepped into the dust-choked dark. The air was thick with cedar and thyme. The overhead bulb flickered twice and gave out, leaving me with nothing but the narrow cone of the flashlight and the sound of creaking floorboards above where Emily was walking. It was quiet, too quiet, like the kind of quiet that comes before a confession. The floor was scattered with boxes. Old army crates, metal filing drawers, faded masking tape labels that had lost their ink to years of humidity. I worked slowly, moving box after box, brushing off cobwebs, coughing through the dust. Finally, in the back corner, I found a narrow tin footlocker, the kind they issued post-war. It was wedged behind a broken coat rack beneath an old tarp. My hands hesitated before touching the latch. That old lock hadn't seen daylight in decades. Inside, the first thing I saw was a folded canvas. Not the flag, that stayed on the pole, but a second one. A backup, maybe. Next to it, a bundle of letters tied with string, yellowed at the edges, and then I saw it. An envelope, with a red wax seal, cracked, half dissolved, but still holding on. The words stamped across the top read, "War Department. Declassification request. Pending." My heart picked up. Inside was a certificate, half torn at the bottom, but clearly authentic. A declaration that the flag flown at the Whitmore residence had once been raised over a medical encampment in Sainte-Mère-Église during the Normandy campaign. My grandfather had brought it home. He never boasted about it, he just let it speak. And now, maybe it would speak again. "Dad?" Emily's voice drifted down from the top of the stairs. "In here," I called, standing up slowly. "Grab your phone, I need a few photos." She blinked when she stepped into the room. "Whoa, this place looks like a time capsule." "Feel it, and we just cracked it." I laid the letter on the workbench, snapped photos of it with a timestamp. Emily gently unfolded the canvas flag beside it. "This one's even older than the one outside," she said. "Keep it flat, we'll take it to an expert later." That night we scanned everything, certificates, dates, handwritten notes in my grandfather's looping cursive. He mentioned a man named Charles Meeker, a military historian he used to correspond with. Said Charles had verified the flag once, long ago. I underlined the name. Another trail to follow. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had a weapon of my own. Not a threat. Not a protest sign. Is the truth. Emily looked at me after we finished organizing the files. Do you think this will be enough? Maybe not to stop them, I said, but it'll make it a hell of a lot harder for them to pretend they're right. Outside, the porch light flickered. The flag rippled gently in the night wind, casting a soft shadow across the front steps. The shadow moved, then paused, and I swore, just for a moment, I saw someone duck behind the mailbox. Karen? One of her foot soldiers? Didn't matter, let them watch. Because now I had more than a story. I had history, and history always leaves a mark. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee, one for me, one untouched across from me out of habit. I used to pour Hannah's cup whether she was home or not. Some routines aren't for the living, they're for memory. Emily shuffled in, hair in a mess, still in pajamas. She pointed at the second cup and gave a sleepy smile. You still do that? Every day, I said. Keeps me honest. She sat down, pulled the folder toward her. So what's the plan? I tapped the corner of one scanned page. This name. Charles Meeker. Grandpa said he used to verify historical military artifacts, and unless there's more than one Charles Meeker who works with flags and war records, he's our guy. We started digging, found an old obituary from a decade ago. Meeker had passed, but his son, Douglas Meeker, had taken over his research, ran a private archive service out of a garage in San Dimas, about 2 hours south. No website, just a number buried in a veterans forum. I called it Meeker Archives, said a gravelly voice, older, sharp, guarded. Hi, Mr. Meeker, my name's Daniel Whitmore. I believe your father worked with my grandfather, Elliot Whitmore, on a flag verification back in the 90s? Silence. Then a slow exhale. I haven't heard that name in years, he said. The Normandy flag. I remember the file, you still have it? We have a copy of the certificate and a physical backup flag in storage, the original's still flying. That's gutsy. You have no idea. We're under fire from a local HOA, trying to have the flag removed for non-compliance. I need documentation that holds water. He paused again. I've got the original correspondence locked in a steel drawer. Your grandfather mailed in a hand-drawn map of the encampment perimeter. I think I even have a photo of him standing under that flag. My throat went dry. Would you be willing to share copies? I'll do one better. You're not far. Drive down. I'll give you what I've got, under one condition. What's that? Tell me the whole story. I don't help bureaucrats, but if you're the man I think your grandfather raised, I'll help you make it bulletproof. We agreed to meet the next day. That afternoon, I stopped by Lucinda Marsh's house. She opened the door before I even knocked, like she'd been expecting me. I found something, I told her. She invited me in, poured lemonade, and sat by the window, where she kept a dusty album open on her coffee table. Elliot showed me that flag in 1972, she said softly. He'd just hung it for the 4th of July and told me it wasn't just a flag, it was a chapter. Lucinda pointed at a photograph taped to one page. It showed the porch, my porch, the flag, and Grandpa, tall and straight-backed, standing beside a teenage version of my father. You think this will help? I asked. She closed the album gently. If it doesn't, they've stopped listening to reason entirely. I took a photo of the picture, then walked home slower than usual. There was something grounding about that moment, about realizing that memories don't just live in one house. They echo through others, through people who watched and remembered, even if they never said a word. That night, I told Emily to pack an overnight bag. We were heading to San Dimas at dawn. Think this guy will really help? She asked, slinging a hoodie over her shoulder. I don't know, I said honestly, but we're going to find out, and we're going to put something in front of Karen that she can't dismiss with a gavel or a smug smile. Outside, the flag still moved, slow, steady, unfazed by everything below it. And as we turned off the porch light, I glanced at the old wooden swing still creaking in the breeze. Hannah's favorite spot. I'd sat there as a kid with Grandpa. I'd sat there with Hannah the day after we buried him. Emily was born into that swing's shadow. It was more than furniture. It was the front row to our story, and it was time the rest of the world read it. Have you ever uncovered something hidden that changed everything? Drop your story in the comments, and if you're fighting your own quiet battle, hit subscribe. Sometimes the truth is just waiting to be found. The drive to San Dimas was quiet. Emily dozed off halfway through, her hoodie pulled tight over her head, legs curled beneath her like she was retreating into childhood. The sun hadn't even broken the horizon yet. I kept one hand on the wheel and the other on the printed envelope of documents we'd found in the basement. It felt heavier than it should have. We pulled into a small cul-de-sac tucked behind a run-down strip of businesses. There was no sign out front, just a brass nameplate that read Meeker Archival Consulting. The garage door creaked open slowly as we approached, and Douglas Meeker stepped out wearing a flannel shirt, jeans, and a face that had lived through too many bureaucracy fights. "You're early," he said. "I like that." Inside was a time capsule of military history. Framed telegrams, sealed shadow boxes, cabinets full of labeled reels and microfilm. Douglas worked with care, his hands calloused, his tone exact. "Your grandfather's file is complete," he said, opening a locked drawer. "Charles was meticulous. Here, take a look." He laid out a collection of documents, the original verification letter on War Department letterhead, a photo of my grandfather with the flag post D-Day, and a carbon copy of a request for historical monument consideration. Dated 1983, signed, stamped, never filed. My jaw tightened. "This was real?" I asked. "Real enough to make a case," Douglas said. "Especially with the new stuff you've uncovered. Karen Delaney won't know what hit her." Emily looked up from the photo. "Can we get this scanned?" "I already have it digitized. I'll email the archive file, and I'll write an affidavit verifying chain of custody and authentication." I extended my hand. "You just gave me the kind of ammunition they don't see coming." He shook it. "No charge, some fights are worth it." We left with a thumb drive, a box of originals, and more resolve than ever. But it was what happened after we got home that changed everything. The porch was quiet. The flag still flew. The camera light blinked. A sign it had recorded movement. While Emily unpacked, I reviewed the footage. 3:14 a.m. A shadow moved near the porch. Someone walked up the steps, paused, then reached into their coat and placed something beneath the doormat. I stepped outside, lifted the mat, and found a manila envelope. Inside was a copy of the HOA meeting minutes from 6 months ago, the night the flag height clause was quietly added. But what made my stomach turn was the attached note in shaky handwriting. "She altered the record. This is the original." No name, but the paper trembled in my hand like the voice behind it had. I knocked on Elliot Granger's door an hour later. He answered in his bathrobe, dark circles under his eyes, fingers fidgeting with the tie at his waist. "I got something," I said. "It came anonymously, but I think you and I both know who left it." He didn't speak, just stepped aside and let me in. The living room was clean, too clean, like someone had spent all night deciding whether to leave or confess. I placed the envelope on his table. "You've been watching this play out for weeks, and I think part of you wanted to do the right thing, but part of you was scared." He sank into a chair, exhaling like a dam finally broke. "I didn't agree with her, I never did, but she had the majority. Every vote, every change, it went through her, and when I saw her rewrite that clause, I knew it was wrong. You could have stopped it." He looked up, eyes glassy. "I know. That's why I'm helping now." "You willing to testify?" "I won't let her rewrite history to win a pissing contest over a flag." That was the first time I saw Elliot not as a coward, but as a man who'd finally remembered how to stand. Back at home, I opened a new folder on my computer, labeled it Counteraction. Inside, Meeker's affidavit, the original HOA minutes, Elliot's typed statement, and a photo of my grandfather saluting that flag. The time for defending was over. It was time to fight back. By morning, the folder labeled Counteraction wasn't just a digital archive, it was a war chest. Emily stood beside me at the kitchen table, flipping through the printed stack like a junior attorney. Affidavit from Douglas Meeker. Archived military correspondence. Elliot's handwritten statement. And the smoking gun. The original HOA minutes, unedited, time-stamped. Real. "This is a takedown file," she said. "You're not just defending anymore, are you?" "No," I said. "Now I'm prosecuting." We spent the morning assembling binders, one for the Historical Preservation Committee, one for the City Council, one for the media, just in case, and one, very intentionally, for Karen Delaney. But we weren't going to hand them over yet. First, we needed to set the table. I started by emailing the Meeker affidavit to the local historical landmarks office. I added a short cover note. This flag has not only survived a war, but a war on memory. I'm requesting an immediate review for historical designation. Attached was a photograph of my grandfather, the porch, the flag, and Emily, 3 generations standing beneath one story. Then I reached out to a contact I hadn't called in years, Alan Rhodes, an old college friend who now worked for a mid-tier news blog with a decent local reach. He answered on the second ring. "Daniel Whitmore, what are you caught up in now?" "OH drama, but not the kind with bad hedges." "You always did love a good underdog angle. Pitch me." I told him everything. The flag, the forged amendments, the silence, the old man's confession. By the time I finished, Alan whistled through the line. "You got receipts?" "More than Starbucks. I'll have a photographer outside your house by noon." Meanwhile, Emily had a different idea. "We need to push her buttons," she said. "Not just defend, but draw her out. Make her overplay." I paused. "Go on." "She's obsessed with control, right? What if you bait her into a conversation? Something casual, friendly, but record it." I blinked. That's not a bad idea. So we set the scene. Saturday morning, coffee mug in hand, I waited outside while Emily adjusted the tiny mic clipped under my flannel. I sat on the porch swing, and just waited. At 9:12 a.m., like clockwork, Karen strutted down the sidewalk in her power walk outfit, clipboard tucked under her arm like it was part of her anatomy. "Morning, Karen," I called, waving casually. She slowed, surprised. "Mr. Whitmore, I assume the flag will be down before your upcoming disciplinary hearing?" I smiled. "Actually, I wanted to ask your opinion. Did you personally propose the elevation clause in last quarter's update?" She didn't miss a beat. "Of course I did. I've spearheaded every major compliance improvement in this neighborhood since 2018. Why? Because it's thorough, very thorough. Especially the part about non-sanctioned decorative displays with political or military origin. Very specific." She narrowed her eyes. "Some things don't belong in shared visual space. We're trying to maintain uniformity." "And heritage?" "Heritage doesn't override the bylaws." "We got it." All on tape. As she strutted off, Emily watched from the window and mouthed, "We got her." Later that evening, the Historical Landmarks Office replied. An official review was approved. A representative would visit the property for on-site verification next week. I sat on the porch, binder in my lap, and watched the flag sway against a pink sunset. The porch swing creaked beneath me, familiar, grounding. Emily came out and sat beside me, folding her knees under her sweatshirt. "You really think she knows what's coming?" she asked. "No," I said, "and that's the point." I leaned back, fingers drumming the cover of the binder. This wasn't just personal anymore. It was surgical. The next few days passed with a calm so unnatural I almost didn't trust it. Karen didn't leave any new notices, no emails, no early morning threats. The clipboard patrols stopped. It was like the eye of a storm had drifted over us. But I knew better. She wasn't done. She was waiting, probably calling her lawyer, probably preparing a final strike. Which was fine, as so was I. Tuesday morning, a tan sedan pulled up outside our house. A small woman in a gray blazer stepped out, clipboard in hand. Though this one didn't look like it came from Karen's collection, the city seal was embossed on the front. "Daniel Whitmore?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. Historical Landmarks Review Board. I'm here to verify the claims regarding the World War II flag and associated property artifacts." Emily watched from the window, hands pressed to the glass. I walked the official through everything: porch photos, archival documents, the backup flag, Douglas Meeker's affidavit, even the original HOA minutes Elliot had unearthed. She took notes in silence, nodded a few times, and finally said, "This is the most thorough submission we've received all quarter. We'll expedite the review. If the board votes yes, that flag becomes untouchable, protected by both municipal and federal historical ordinances." I felt a knot loosen in my chest for the first time in weeks. That afternoon, Alan's blog article went live. The flag they tried to silence, one man's fight against HOA tyranny. A clean photo of the porch, the flag billowing against a blue sky, and a headline that hit like a hammer. Within hours, it had over 300 shares. My inbox flooded. Neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years left messages of support. Even Jim Blevins, the guy who got cited for aggressive patio chairs, dropped off a 6-pack of root beer and muttered, "Glad someone finally stood up." Karen responded exactly how I hoped she would. By 9:00 p.m., a formal letter was slid under my door. HOA embossed, legal size, filled with rage disguised as policy. You have violated several procedural boundaries by engaging third-party media, inviting unauthorized surveyors, and attempting to undermine board authority. But the real gem came in the final paragraph. Your continued noncompliance will result in escalated legal action, including, but not limited to, a lien against your property, pending disciplinary review at next Tuesday's emergency HOA board meeting. There it was, a public stage, and I had the script already written. But I wasn't done. I printed every document, organized them into color-coded folders, and placed them in a weathered briefcase that used to belong to my father. Then, as Emily packed her school bag, I turned to her with a thought. "You still have that essay?" She blinked. "The one I wrote?" "Yeah, I want it read at the meeting." "You're serious?" "I want them to hear exactly what this flag means from someone who's inheriting it." She nodded slowly, then went to print a clean copy. Later that night, the porch light flickered again. Motion sensor. A shadow moved past the edge of the camera. I pulled up the feed. Karen. She wasn't on the steps this time, just across the street, standing still, watching. I didn't wave. Didn't move. I just sat on the porch swing, folder in hand, letting her see what was coming. And that was the moment I realized she didn't have control anymore. She was reacting, following, watching the trap close, unable to stop it. The silence that once felt like defeat now felt like pressure for her. We weren't just defending a flag anymore. We were setting the stage to make sure it could never be touched again. Have you ever had to outthink someone who thought they held all the power? Tell us your story in the comments, and if you believe quiet strength wins the long game, hit subscribe. The real battle isn't loud, it's strategic. Karen had been waiting to catch me off guard, but now she was the one pacing. Tuesday arrived, and with it came the so-called emergency HOA board meeting. It was held in the community clubhouse. Same sterile walls, same humming fluorescent lights. But the mood? Different this time. Tighter. Like something real was about to go down. I arrived 10 minutes early, not because I needed time, but because I wanted them to see me calm. Emily came with me, holding her essay like it was a court exhibit. She wore her mother's old denim jacket, sleeves rolled, shoulders squared. That jacket had sat in a closet for years, untouched since Hannah passed. But tonight, Emily chose it. She never said why. She didn't need to. We walked in together. Karen was already seated at the head of the table, her signature clipboard replaced with a sleek black folder. That told me one thing. She was rattled. You don't swap your weapons unless the old ones stop working. The rest of the board filtered in. Elliot sat 2 chairs from her, glancing down, visibly sweating. When everyone settled, Karen tapped her gavel. This emergency session is in regard to Daniel Whitmore's continued violations, media involvement, and unauthorized interactions with municipal agencies. This board has been misrepresented, and corrective action must be considered. Her voice was clipped, over-rehearsed, no warmth, no surprise. I stood. Before you get too far into that, I'd like to submit some materials for the board's review. I handed out neatly labeled folders to each member, color-coded tabs, date-sorted evidence, legal citations in bold. Karen didn't touch hers. I've included original HOA meeting minutes, provided by Mr. Granger, showing that the clause in question was added without proper vote. I've also included an affidavit from a certified military archivist confirming the historical nature of the flag. And lastly, an acceptance letter from the city's Historical Landmarks Office. The flag is under review for full protection. A murmur spread across the room. I kept going. This isn't just about a flag, it's about abuse of authority, tampered records, fear tactics. Karen tried to cut in. You're not recognized to speak. Due process, Elliot interrupted, surprising everyone, including himself. We failed to follow due process. I failed to object when I should have. This board's actions weren't just misguided, they were unlawful. Karen's mouth tightened like she'd tasted something rotten. Do you have proof of this so-called affidavit? I nodded to Emily. She stood, a little shaky at first, but her voice didn't waver. My name is Emily Whitmore. I'm 17, and this is an excerpt from the essay I wrote about my great-grandfather's flag. She unfolded the paper, cleared her throat. When people ask what patriotism looks like, they expect fireworks and speeches, but in my family, it looked like a quiet man coming home from war and raising a flag on the porch. Not to show off, but to remind us what we stand for. That flag flew through births, deaths, love, and loss, and now someone wants to take it down, not because it's wrong, but because it's inconvenient. The room was still. She finished with a simple line. If we let that happen, then we're saying stories like his don't matter anymore. A few people clapped, not many, but enough. Karen, red-faced now, snapped, "This is not an open forum for children." Elliot stood again. "It's a community meeting, and that was the most honest thing said here all year." Karen slammed her folder shut. "If you're done with your theatrics, I move to table this issue until after legal consultation." "No," I said calmly, "you don't get to table the truth." I pulled out one last document, the cease and desist letter my attorney had prepared, just in case. I placed it in front of her like a checkmate. "If any further retaliation is attempted before the landmark vote, we'll proceed with a formal lawsuit." She stared at me. For the first time, she looked small. Because she didn't expect the paper trail. She expected another neighbor who'd fold under pressure. Instead, she got us. Karen didn't speak after I handed her the cease and desist letter. She just sat there, fingers clenched tight around her black folder, eyes darting. Not angry now, but calculating. Trying to figure out how she'd lost control of the room without even realizing it. The rest of the board sat frozen. You could feel it. Like the air had shifted, a weight had moved, and not in her favor. Lucinda Marsh stood in the back, arms folded over her chest, her voice clear and sharp. I motioned to suspend Karen Delaney as acting HOA president pending legal review. A pause. Not stunned silence, just surprise that someone finally said it aloud. Mrs. Vanders, one of Karen's longtime supporters, perpetually prim, always silent, spoke next. I second. Karen's head snapped toward her. "You can't be serious." "I am," Mrs. Vanders said. "This is supposed to be about community, not domination." Elliot, still standing, nodded. "All in favor?" One by one, hands lifted. Every single one. Even Karen's husband, silent until now, raised his with a sigh. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, it was the kind of quiet that echoes. Karen looked around, realizing there was no one left standing with her. She rose, but slower this time. The gavel in front of her suddenly felt too heavy. She didn't slam it. She didn't say a word. She just closed her folder, gathered her papers, and walked out of the room. Emily watched her go, then turned to me. "We did it?" "Not yet," I said, "but we just cleared the path." After the meeting, people came up. Lucinda patted my arm and whispered, "Your grandfather would be proud." Jim Blevins gave me a grin that actually looked like relief. Even Mrs. Vanders pulled Emily aside and told her, "That essay, I hope you never stop writing." We didn't celebrate. Not yet. There was still one step left. 2 days later, the email came from the Historical Landmarks Office. Subject: Final decision, approval granted. The flag, the porch, the documents, the photo, even the porch swing, it was all now part of an officially protected heritage site. They called it the Whitmore Homefront Memorial. Emily was in the kitchen when I read it. I didn't say anything at first, I just handed her the screen. She read it once, then again, and then she whispered, "We saved it." "No," I said, "we honored it." That afternoon, a few of the new interim board members stopped by. They didn't come with clipboards or forms, just coffee and a handshake. "We're rewriting the handbook," one of them said, this time in public. Elliot didn't show up that day, but he left a note in our mailbox. "Tell your daughter her words reminded me what this place is supposed to mean, and tell your grandfather thank you for starting it." We placed the official landmark plaque beneath the flag the next day. It was simple, bronze, just 4 lines. "This home honors the legacy of Elliot Whitmore, 1919-1997, ARI veteran and community builder. May this flag always remind us what dignity looks like in silence and what courage looks like in action. Emily was the one who nailed it into the porch rail. The same rail her mother used to lean on, barefoot, every summer night. And when the neighbors gathered, quietly, respectfully, and without anyone being fined for standing too long on the sidewalk, we didn't give speeches. We just stood there, together. A few minutes later, Officer Riley pulled up, not in uniform this time. He parked, nodded at me, and said, "Guess I was right. That flag's not just historical, it's untouchable." We shook hands. Karen didn't show her face that week. I heard rumors. She was contesting the suspension. Maybe she'd file something, maybe not, but she wouldn't win. Not anymore, because the truth had a paper trail now, a community behind it, and a flag that could never be folded again. The next Saturday, Emily and I sat on the porch just before sundown. The air was cooler, quieter. No buzz of power-walking board members, no rustling of fines taped to front doors. Just the soft rustle of the flag above us, catching the last golden streaks of light as the day folded itself into memory. Across the street, two new neighbors unloaded a dining table from a pickup truck. No clipboard in sight, no one demanding pre-approval for the wood finish. It felt different now. Not fixed, not perfect, but freer. I looked over at Emily, her legs tucked under her, still wearing Hannah's jacket like armor. She hadn't said much since the plaque went up, but her silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. "I keep thinking," she said finally, "that all this started with one piece of fabric." I smiled. "It never was just fabric." She nodded slowly. "I think Grandpa knew that. I think Mom did too." Behind us, inside the house, the hallway was lined now with what we called the trail. The framed photos, documents, and letters that helped tell the full story. The War Department letter, the Meeker affidavit, a printed copy of her essay, even a scanned image of the original HOA minutes signed by Elliot, now placed not as a weapon, but as a reminder. In the center of that wall hung a small frame that Emily had put together herself. A photo of the porch swing. 3 generations, 1 shadow. We didn't win this fight by yelling louder. We didn't storm the gates or burn the handbook. We didn't need to. We just told the truth louder than their silence. That following Monday, I got a letter from the interim board. No threats, no accusations. Just a quiet, handwritten thank you. Inside was a single line. "Thank you for reminding us that history doesn't belong in storage." I walked outside and sat under the flag. Lucinda came by with lemon bars. Jim waved from across the street, beer in hand. Someone had chalked "Thank you" on the sidewalk in big block letters. And I didn't need a vote to know how the neighborhood felt. They weren't scared anymore. Even Elliot, who had vanished for a few days after the public fallout, eventually stopped by. He stood in front of the porch like it was holy ground and said nothing for a long time. Then, just before walking away, he muttered, "She never stood a chance, not against this." I didn't ask who he meant. Karen, the HOA, the system. Didn't matter. The truth had outlasted them all. That night, as the porch light flickered on, I leaned back in the swing and took one last look at the flag. Steady, still, right where it belonged. And I thought about everything we'd built, not just the case, but the legacy. Because we didn't just stop an injustice. We preserved something sacred. A story, a home, and a quiet kind of defiance that needed no permission to endure. Some people think the fight ends when you win, but the truth is, when you win with dignity, that's when something begins. Have you ever had to stand your ground against unfair rules or entitled leadership? Drop your story in the comments, or just let us know where you're watching from. We read every one. If you're still fighting for something that matters, remember, you're not alone. Subscribe if you believe legacy should be protected, not policed.